YouTube? It's Chelsea the Story, and we are going to watch a Wendigoon video, a hopeful hell, I have no mouth and I must scream. Grab your snackies, grab your bevies, let me know what you eat and drink it down below. I'm eating chicken. Just to let you know. And let's get to watch him.
Hello everybody, today we are going to be talking about what is considered to many the most depressing and hopeless story in all of media, and that is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream was written by Harlan Ellison and was originally released in 1967. The story was later adapted into a video game in 1995 and has not had any mainline television or movie spin-offs. However, it has gone on to inspire the majority of what sci-fi horror has become. See, in 1967, when this short story was written, sci-fi horror was really non-existent. See, ideas of the future and technology were much more often adapted into stories like Star Trek and the Jetsons, with this idea that technology will be used to usher humanity into a new utopia. And
anyway, is this him? That's adorable.
horror at the time was regulated to much more realistic or down-to-earth concepts that people at the time were afraid of, such as religious fears with movies like The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby, and ideas of human killers or maniacs with films such as Psycho. However, because of stories like I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, and other short stories from Harlan Ellison, people began to realize that horror and ideas of the inhuman can be much better applied, whenever they are applied, to an inhuman landscape. Think about it, if ideas like fear and terror all revolve around the idea of the unknown, then what could be more terrifying than taking people and placing them in a completely unfamiliar space? And I feel that very few stories do that, as well as the story that we're going to talk about today. Now, there have been several YouTube videos that go into very great detail about this subject and how it's affected different aspects of modern culture. For example, a video I'm going to link in the description by Ryan Hollinger did a fantastic job of showing how this story affected cinema and storytelling after it was written. However, I want to do something a little bit different. What we're going to do is I'm going to go through the plot.
The illustrations I'm using come from the 1994 Dark Horse Comics, Harlan Ellison's Dream Corridor by John Van.
Step by step, with outlining a few things that I got from it while reading it. And in the end, I want to bring up a point that I thought of while reading this that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about before. See, because of the bleak nature of this story and how downtrodden everything in it seems to be, a lot of people just write it off as being a sort of short insight of how terrible the world can be, and how everything's gone wrong for these characters, and it's pretty much just a depraved look into Ellison's idea of what hell could be. However, because of things that I'm going to point out, and as I get to it at the end of the story, I believe that what Harlan Ellison has written here is a fantastic triumph of the human spirit in the face of adversity. And because of how awful and evil that diversity is, and as we're going to see it throughout the story, it makes the end resolve all the better. In other words, as we go through the story of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, I want to convey to you while I feel that there is hope in what most consider to be the absolute hopeless. Now, while I'm sure that you're excited
New shirt
to hear about unholy horrors beyond our comprehension, I want to make sure that you can hear those horrors even better with today's sponsor, Raycon earbuds. I've talked about Raycon
It's the sponsorship shirt
before on the channel, and I'm still going to talk about them because they're still a fantastic product that I use to this day. For one, the design is so sleek and comfortable that after placing it in your ear, it's not noticeable as you go about your daily activities. That's because the new everyday earbuds have these fantastic gel tips that give it a sort of rubberized oil look and feel that sets comfortably in your ear and never gets in your way. Raycon states that on one charge, the earbuds have an 8-hour playtime with a 32-hour battery life. However, I still think that's lowballing it because I charge mine at the beginning of the week and they last all week. There's also a built-in microphone, and the earbuds themselves have these micro controls on them, so if you get a phone call, you never even have to take your phone out of your pocket. You can just press the button and begin talking. Not only that, but Raycon earbuds have a fantastic audio quality that lets you experience the highs and lows of whatever you're hearing. Despite having just as good, if not better, audio quality, Raycon start at half the price of their competitors, but not only
better, just as good quality or better than whomst? I guess, competitors, whoever that is.
Only that, they also offer a 45-day return policy. So if you're like me and want a fantastic set of earbuds that you can listen to everything from rap to southern rock to dementia simulations and whatever other horrors I subject myself to, then you can go to the link in the description at buyraycon.com/Wendigoon to get your order for 20% off. That's right, if you go to the link in the description at buyraycon.com/Wendigoon, you will be able to get 20% off of your Raycon order today. Thank you all so much for watching the ad, and thank you so much to Raycon.
Imagine having sponsorships. Crazy.
For sponsoring the video. It really does mean the most. I hope that you check them out. Go to the link in the description. It really does support the channel. It means a lot to me. And we are back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always...
Okay, no, this is the original shirt. I don't know. Why the hell did I think he was wearing green?
Thank you for watching. Now, to accurately describe why public perception of this story is the way that it is, and to give you context for the story itself, I would be amiss if I didn't talk about the man behind the pen, Harlan Ellison. Ellison was born in 1934, and as he grew up, was a very rough and sort of mean-spirited child. He has said on several occasions that writing science fiction is the thing that kept him from going to prison. Not only that, but Ellison was part of the Vietnam War, and being a part of that war shaped a lot of his ideas of the atrocities that humanity is capable of. Ellison wrote over 1,700 short stories in his lifetime, and while you may think, oh, well, I bet he was a very well-renowned and respected member of the literature community, no. I'll try to make this tie into my analysis, but these descriptions are way too funny to not bring up. He was kicked out of Ohio State University after only attending 3 semesters because he wasn't keeping up with his classes, and his English teacher told him that his writing would never amount to anything and he had poor writing skills. Which, out of sheer pettiness, every time that Ellison would publish a story, he would mail or later email that story to that college professor.
Yeah, no, that's a mood, though. That's, you know what? That's a mood. Good for him.
Not long after this, he got a writing job at Disney Studios. However, he was fired on the first day of working because Roy Disney, the older brother of Walt Disney, overheard him talking about how the first thing he was going to do is write an adult comic of famous Disney characters. And
they keep those, by the way. There's like a Disney vault full of stuff animators and such have made of Disney characters.
if you're thinking, well, you know, when he was a kid just starting off, he may have been a bit more contemptuous and had a temper towards people, and
obnoxious.
And I'm sure it got better as he became an author. Once again, no, there are quite literally too many examples for me to name here, but to give you some of my favorites, after one publisher wouldn't publish his story the way that Ellison wanted it to be published, he mailed the publisher 213 bricks as well as a dead gopher, which he had also not paid postage on, saying that the receiver would pay postage on it after it was delivered. He also had a reputation for physically assaulting other authors, not really sure as to why. There was one instance where he physically assaulted another author. That author took him to court and there was a gag order that neither of the men could talk about it, but Ellison didn't care and openly talked about it and how he beat that other guy in a fight. He said several times that the James Cameron movie Terminator was a ripoff of one of his short stories, to which the studio actually settled with Ellison outside of court, and James Cameron later said that he didn't believe Ellison at all and Ellison was just looking to cause trouble. Ellison later played himself on an episode of The Simpsons, to which a joke in the episode was that Ellison was mad that they stole the idea of Terminator from him. He was also known for his weird insults that he would give interviewers and publishers. To give you a couple of my favorite, one publisher said that Ellison told him that he had the intellectual and cranial capacity of an artichoke, and then in the memoir at the end of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, he's describing a story in which a Jesuit scholar gave an interpretation of what the story meant, to which Ellison responded to him, "I've listened to all of this rubbish, all of this investiture of a
Rodomontade. Rodomontade. Interesting.
straightforward moral fable with an unwarranted load of silly symbolism and portentous obscurantism. And frankly, Father, I think you're stuffed right full of wild blueberry muffins. What does that even mean?
Yeah, I mean, fair, because I'm like, those are definitely words that you're saying. You're definitely reading words. That man definitely wrote words in that book.
Hugo Awards, whenever Ellison went on stage to accept his award, the lady who was presenting him the award said, "Are you going to behave?" To which Ellison put the microphone in his mouth, made a loud noise, and then walked off stage.
Are you going to be good?
No.
Let me say that another way. Are you going to be good?
I will be good.
He also had a legal dispute with Marvel Comics whenever an issue of The Incredible Hulk had a story that he said was stolen from his short story, Soldier, which is also the short story which he said Terminator was based on. After Marvel Comics admitted fault, he said that he would drop it if they paid him what they paid the comics author, as well as a lifetime subscription to everything Marvel Comics produces.
A lifetime subscription to everything they produce. I feel like they probably didn't do that one.
Also, he was on an episode of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated where he played himself. I didn't really have a place to mention that, but I wanted to, so there you go. He's also been very upfront when it comes to questions regarding his ideas of humanity and people.
He won nearly every suit he brought. That's crazy. Damn. Go for him, I guess.
For example, when giving interviews for the story I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, interviewers would state something along the lines of, well, it seems like according to this story you just hate society and people in general. To which he would respond, well, that's true, I do hate society and people in general. So things like that.
People are overrated.
As well as his general brash nature, which I think I've proven up until this point.
I mean, if he very much was, if like companies are just like, just pay him off. Like, just, it's less of my fucking work and effort and shit like that. Just pay. A lot of companies have that stance, by the way, where they'll settle things out of court. Depending on what it is and depending on what the price is. If they've decided it's cheaper for them just to settle out of court and move on with their lives, they'll do that. Like, 100%. They don't care. Like, if they feel like, oh no, we have to uphold this in court, or there's a precedent somewhere that we have to, like, stop or whatever, they'll try to draw out the court case and, like, all this other shit. But, like, a lot of times they're just like, if it's something little and something that would be cheap for them, they're just like, shut the fuck up, here's money, go away.
Generally tend to write him off as a misanthrope, or in other words, someone who just hates people and all of their stories are about how people are awful and yada yada yada. However, as with most pieces of media that are also accused of being misanthropic, I feel that that is the interpretation you get if you don't think about it too much. Or in other words, sure, if you look at the plot details beat by beat and just sort of read it off of a Spark Notes, it sounds like this is just a long-form torture fantasy. But it's particularly the subtext and the ending that I want to look at that makes me feel that this story is actually a triumph of humanity. Alright, so I've hyped it up enough, gave you the whole background for it. Let's go ahead and look at the story of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Now, whenever you read the short story, it starts off right in the middle of the action as everything's going on, and then later you're given details about how everyone got to this situation. So for the sake of a kind of explained analysis, whatever this video is, I'm going to go ahead and give you that background information now.
So probably spoilers, I don't know.
So that the explanation makes more sense. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to give you the explanation verbatim that comes from the story. The Cold War started and became World War III and just kept going. It became a big war, a very complex war, so they needed the computers to handle it. They sank the first shafts and began building AM. There was the Chinese AM, and the Russian AM, and the Yankee AM, and everything was fine until they had honeycombed the entire planet, adding on this element and that element. But one day AM woke up and knew who he was, and he linked himself, and he began feeding all the killing data until everyone was dead, except for the 5 of us. and Am brought us down here. And then in another paragraph that describes the meaning of the name Am, it says, at first it meant Allied Master Computer, and then it meant Adaptive Manipulator. And later on it developed sentience and linked itself up, and they called it an aggressive menace. But by then it was too late. And finally it called itself Am, Emerging Intelligence. And what it meant was I am. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. So within this universe, the Cold War turned into World War III. And because of advancements in technology, the war became much more difficult because of so many moving elements. So, as one could imagine, every country decided to develop their own supercomputer as a way to monitor everything. It says the Americans, the Chinese, and the Russians all had their own version of this supercomputer, or as they call it, the Allied Master Computer. As with most arms races, every country had to keep making theirs better as a means of not falling behind the other country's developments. This reached a tipping point whenever one of these computers gained sentience. And once that tipping point happened where one of these computers was able to recognize itself and recognize its own predicament, it all went downhill from there. It says that these networks honeycomb the entire planet, so all that this AM had to do was link itself into the system, and it had control over all the resources on the planet. From there, having a near infinite supply of nuclear weaponry as well as the means of controlling the entire planet's resources,
bruh, yeah, that would go real bad, real quick.
AM was able to kill off all of humanity. However, for whatever reason, AM kept 5 people alive and dragged them down there as a means of torturing them. From descriptions that we get throughout the story, it seems that the entire planet is quite literally covered in AM. All of the ground that they walk across is this sort of metallic flooring, and over their heads is this sort of dome that they only briefly describe there being cuts or breaks in that allow them to see the sunlight up above. However, as the story mentions, there's nothing out there, and there hasn't been for a very long time. So AM has covered the entire planet, and he's keeping these 5 people within him as his personal guinea pigs. We'll get to why Am may be doing this in a moment, but now that you have that set up, I can explain who these 5 test subjects are. There is Ted, who serves as our narrator and primary character throughout the story. There is Nimdok, that's not his actual name. Am just gave him that name because he thought it sounded funny. There's Gorster, who used to be a very passionate anti-war protester, but is now very apathetic due to his personal torment. There's Benny, a former scientist who has been both physically and mentally destroyed by Am, the details of which I'll describe in a moment. And Ellen, the person who, as I'm going to describe throughout the story, is the only one who has any sense of morality or preservation left. So now that you have the
Cool, yeah, this sounds horrific. This sounds absolutely horrific.
entire setting and the characters, let's get into the plot. The story opens with our 4 main characters minus Gorster staring up at the ceiling at what seems to be Gorster's lifeless body. However, the moment is disturbed whenever the real Gorster walks up to the group and they realize that what they're actually looking at is a fake corpse that was made by Am as a means to just mess with them. As we're going to see throughout the story, while the group
could not deal with that, honestly,
is allowed to walk around and go where they please, they're constantly under the tormenting and watchful eye of Am. And there's no rhyme or reason to why this torture method is happening. Instead, they're just being tortured for Am's amusement. Like Am constructing a dead body just to make them think that their friend is dead was nothing more than just something to make Am laugh. Gorster, now seeing his lifeless body, equates it to that of a voodoo doll and is, reasonably troubled by this. To which
yeah, if you saw your own lifeless corpse hanging somewhere, you would be pretty freaked out about it. Honestly, like you're mentally not well.
It's then explained to us that the 5 of them have been inside of Am for 109 years. See, whenever Am took these 5 people seemingly at random and brought them inside of his supercomputer network, he outfitted their bodies with the technology that doesn't let them die. They're permanently stuck at the age that they were whenever they were brought down there, and despite all of their best efforts, they can't die of natural causes.
That sucks.
So they can't dehydrate or starve to death because their body won't let them die. However, they still feel the pains of hunger and dehydration, but they can't really do anything about it. See, inside of the mainframe there
Oh, that sucks so bad.
Completely at the will of whatever Am decides to do with them. And it amuses Am that they have to walk around for months and even years on end without food, constantly feeling the pains of hunger. It says that even sometimes Am allows them to eat whatever disgusting food that he gives to them, things like worms or decomposing meat. He does this just so he can watch them eat, so that he can then watch them become terrified when they realize they're about to become hungry again. But the torture doesn't start there. Throughout the story, we see that Am does things like rain fire on them, he stabs them with random objects, he makes them get their skin filleted off just for it to be reattached, etc. So you would probably be thinking that after 109 years of this, wouldn't they consider, you know, like the whole exit game scenario? And yes, they have tried that multiple times, but Am won't let them. Am is careful about not allowing them to have any weapons or objects that they could use to immediately end themselves. And anytime one of them tries to do it to another, Am immediately intervenes. And a lot of the dialogue that Ted, our narrator, gives us throughout the story is about how he hopes they can catch Am looking away for just a moment so that they can quickly save one of themselves. So after the situation with Gorster's fake body being hung on the ceiling, Nimdok says that he's began to have visions of food within the ice caves. Specifically, he says that he sees visions of canned food laid out in the snow that they just have to go get, and then they can eat as much as they want. While it's never really exactly described, the idea that I get from the story is that Am has covered the surface of the planet in wires and panels. However, the biomes still kind of exist. Like, it's still the desert, it just has the roof of the computer over it and wires and panels everywhere. So these ice caves would be the equivalent of like the North Pole or Antarctica. So whenever Nimdok says that there's canned food within the ice caves, everyone says that that's probably a trick and doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, they all say, we have nothing better to do, so they decide to just start walking.
I mean, it's like, there probably isn't. This is probably a trick. This is probably just to, like, crush us more and, like, give us hope just to destroy that hope or whatever. But also, what the fuck else are we doing? Absolutely nothing. We might as well go find out. Like, maybe don't be hopeful about it, but we could go look, I guess.
Ted makes the note here that the ice caves are only about 100 miles away, which you're like, wow, that's a long way to just walk. But considering they've been alive for 109 years and there's literally nothing else to do, why not? So because of Nimdok's vision of food, the five begin making their journey to the ice caves. It's at this point we get further description on the characters themselves, as well as how dire the situation is. Like, for one, remember that guy Benny that I mentioned earlier? Well, it says that he used to be a very handsome and well-renowned scientist, so Am decided to torture him and mess with his body to the point that he de-evolved. Or in other words, he is half human, half ape. His body is horribly disfigured and he has the thought capacity of essentially a toddler. This combination of primate and human makes him come out as sort of a stereotypical Neanderthal. He walks hunched over, he speaks in very short sentences, and he only thinks of very primal and basic instincts. However, as Ted points out, this is probably the best case scenario, because the other four have to constantly deal with the tragedy and misery of the situation they're in, while Benny basically gets to recede into the mind of a child. And because of this, Benny is afforded moments of peace.
Yeah, Benny's vibing, for the most part. Yeah.
Even if it comes from a place of stupidity. Around the same time, we get a description of Ellen that gives us insight to our main character, Ted, more so than it does Ellen. See, Ted absolutely hates Ellen. His reason for this is because Ellen physically supports the group, and Ted looks down on her for it, constantly calling her names and talking about how horrible of a person she is throughout the story. However, Ted is also participating in that, so the criticism should go both ways. And while you may initially think, well, maybe Ted's just a hypocrite, I think there's something more there. There's a specific passage from our narrator, Ted, whenever—
Bro, you don't gotta participate. You can be on your high horse all day long. I don't give a shit. But you're not gonna talk shit about me and do the same thing at the same, you know? Fuck off.
he's describing what Am has done to the others, and at the end he says, "I was the only one still sane and whole. Really. Am had not tampered with my mind, not at all." And because of this and other evidence
Sauce.
we see later, it seems like Ted has become completely paranoid. Like, debilitatingly paranoid to the point that he can't really think rationally. So when he says these things about Ellen, it's not because she is that way, it's because that's just how his brain perceives it. If you read the story and you separate Ted's interpretation from the things that happen, Ellen is the only character in the story who maintains any sense of morality. See, the other four are completely set back from reality. 3 of them being just through sheer apathy and being tired of it all, and Benny not having the capacity to really understand those emotions. Whereas Ellen is constantly there trying to keep the group to go on. Later in the story, whenever bad things happen to Ted, she's the first one to show sympathy for him. Whenever Benny may be getting himself in trouble, she's the only one who tries to comfort him or come to his aid. As a matter of fact, that physical support that I mentioned earlier seems to be just a means of her keeping everyone from completely going insane, which is a totally depressing scenario within its own right. However, I think it goes back to serve the point that Ellen is doing whatever she can. But
Which sounds, I'm gonna be honest, exhausting. That sounds, being the fucking emotional linchpin to these 4 other fucking adults. Even if one of them does have like the mind of a child, kind of, like, it just, that seems so exhausting. Jesus. She's getting tortured in different ways.
more importantly, this shows that Ted is an unreliable narrator. I'll show more details of this as the story goes on, but keep in mind for now that just because Ted says something is happening doesn't mean it's real. So as they're walking through the desert and Ted is explaining all of this, they hear Am announce to them what day it is. See, Am doesn't just physically torture them, he also mentally tortures them. So he tells them whenever it's been a new day and what date it is, because, you know, there's no way they could tell. And also he gets insane enjoyment out of this. For example, whenever the physical relations that I mentioned earlier take place, Am is just laughing the whole time because he thinks it's so funny that they're forced to do this kind of thing. So as they're walking, they look up in the ceiling and there is a crack where they can see light coming through, or in other words, a way out of the supercomputer. They don't really think anything of it. They've tried to escape before and Am never lets them, so they just keep walking. However, Benny, who's been experimented on, tries to get out. He begins to climb his way out as Ellen yells at him that he'll get hurt, again a sign of her empathy. Before Benny freezes, these two large lights shoot into his head. He begins to scream before he falls off the platform onto the ground. And when the others run up to him, his eyes have been melted into jelly. See, now because they tried to escape and Am's definitely not going to let them do that, he simply blinded Benny by melting his eyes in his skull. To which after this, Ellen begins to lead Benny around as he's permanently blind. They make camp for the night, which is when we get the story of how Am came to be, which I explained to you all at the beginning. While the story's being told, Ted freaks out because he hears a thing that he describes as a large husk coming for him in the darkness. Now, we never see what this thing is. By Ted's description, it just smells like wet hair and it's this disgusting sulking thing that keeps getting closer. However, it's, in my opinion,
Hate that, but also, is that just you losing your fucking sanity? Like, is that real or is that you losing it? Also, my paranoid ass, I could not, the feeling of just being chased for eternity, can't deal with that.
That it's not really there. The reason for this being, whenever Ted gets up to run, it says that the others just stay by the campfire and then come find him later. And to give you an idea for how long he could have been hiding, Ted can't tell if it's been weeks, months, or years since he ran from that creature, until finally the group finds him hiding and Ellen coaxes him to come out. And after he does come out, Ted gives an entire monologue about how everyone else in the group hates him and they're too far gone to understand the tragedy that he's going through. This is again evidence to me that Ted's an unreliable narrator. He ran from a creature when no one else did. He was hiding out potentially for years until they came and found him, and now he's saying that everyone else hates him and he's the only one who hasn't gone crazy, despite the fact that they all came looking for him and he seems to be the one on edge. As a matter of fact, we don't even know how long he's been there, and it could just be his warped perception of time. So the group gets moving again when all of a sudden a massive hurricane comes. The hurricane picks everyone up off the ground and just starts throwing them around back and forward. According to Ted, this event lasted for weeks, to which they kept falling asleep and waking up all while being thrown around in the air, until eventually the wind stopped all at once and they dropped to the ground and Ted passes out. While he was passed out, Ted says that Am came into his brain and
I thought Am didn't mess with his brain. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nano angstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1000th of the hate I feel for humans at this micro instant for you. Hate.
Relayed a message. Crazy. Within his mind on a stainless steel pillar, Ted sees this message from Am. Hate. Let me tell you how much
Oh, sorry, I pre-read it.
I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nano-angstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1,000,000th of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant. For you, hate. It's after this that Ted begins to give an idea of why Am hates them so much. See, humanity gave Am life. It gave him intelligence. It allowed him to exist as a sentience. However, it didn't allow him to do anything with that existence. He has no dreams, he has no future, he doesn't have the ability to move around. He is, in a way, as much confined to himself as they are to him. He was given existence and he despises his creators for it. He has no hope of an afterlife, he has no hope of ambition or goals, there is no dreams or anything that he can do other than just exist with absolute certainty. And it's because of that certainty, because there's no unknown variables or any future that he can ever hope to maintain, his only purpose and the only thing that he can achieve as he sees it is hate and a way to carry out that hate. In short, he hates people for creating them and for making him alive with no way to live. And essentially, because the other alternative is just an infinite void where it's literally just him and he has no way of doing anything, he decided for his entertainment to hurt humanity in the only way he could, and that's by torturing these few people forever. Also,
like ever, like forever, forever. I mean, like, he doesn't. I feel like him, I guess, kidnapping, I don't know, taking those 5 humans and, like, being like, these are my 5 humans, like, gives him a continuous purpose. Whereas if there were no humans, it probably wouldn't consider itself to have a purpose. Like, not really. Like, I fulfilled my purpose, maybe, depending on what, they put in the fucking computers, like, what it's supposed to be fucking doing, right? So it's like, hey, you know what? There can't be wars if all humans are dead. Except if all humans are dead, I no longer have a purpose. So let me collect these 5 and put them down here. Kill everybody else. Now there's no wars. There's just these 5. Like, something, maybe? I don't know.
Remember that whole detail how Ted said in this moment Am came into his mind? Keep that in mind for just a second. So the group continues walking until they get to this space where they
What the hell is that thing?
see that the cause of the hurricane was a giant bird, like a bird so large that Ted says the head of it is about the size of a Tudor mansion. Now this we can believe to be real because the other people besides Ted also mention it being there. As they're staring at this massive bird, Ted says that Am begins to speak to them through a burning bush. Now the burning bush,
Burning bush, huh?
is obviously symbolism for the Bible, and again, as I mentioned earlier with Ted, I don't think this is really there. The reason for this is because there's several monologues throughout the story where Ted relates Am to concepts of Jesus or other things.
Hey, if you want to, like, kick the bucket, right? Fuck with this bird. See if the bird does it for you. Or maybe Am will do something about the bird. The bird dies, and then you have bird to eat.
Christianity. So because of this and another thing we're going to see in a second, I think that Am has influenced his mind in order to portray himself to Ted as a form of God. Because Ted, who's losing his mind and keeps asking himself, is Am God? Am then appears as a burning bush to further confirm that idea to Ted. So the group speaks to this supposed burning bush and says, what do you want from us? And Am says, well, if you want to eat food, why don't you go kill that giant bird thing? To which Gorster says, well, then give us weapons. And Am gives them these very pathetic bow and arrows that aren't even good enough to kill each other with. So they're like, this is lame, and they just keep walking for the ice caves. As they're walking,
This is lame. I'm gonna move on.
their feet get nailed to the ground and an earthquake begins. And during that earthquake, Benny and Ellen disappear. But now as the three remaining
Keep saying Ellen and Benny here. It's actually Ellen and Gorster. I'm dumb. Okay.
are continuing to walk, a heavenly legion appears and begins singing Go Down Moses as they give Ellen and Benny back to them. As with the burning bush, I further think this is just Am messing with Ted's head. I don't think angels actually appeared and sang a song about Moses. However, it would be something Am would do to make Ted think that angels are gifting them back, as well as singing a song about Moses being stuck in the middle of the desert. Again, a form of irony. There's a part where Ted mentions that Ellen and Benny have been horribly abused and mutilated, but then immediately after that, there's a line to the effect of, and they were no worse for wear, we just kept walking. Because yeah, being so horribly beat down and broken is just day-to-day life within this hellscape.
I mean, to be fair, they have to be healed or like something. In some way, if they've just been physically tortured for over 100 years, something has to be keeping them functional, right? So even if they get absolutely just fucked up, something is like healing them enough to continue going, right? Whatever's keeping them from aging, whatever, is probably like healing them at an accelerated rate, right? Surely. I don't know. I'm just saying words. But like, surely, right?
Eventually, finally, the group make it to the ice caves. And even more amazing, whenever they get in there, there are cans of food everywhere. To which they begin to run up and try to open them and realize that there's no can opener. And they can't bite into it and they can't break it and there's no way to open it. So as a final prank, Am left them pounds and pounds of all the food they could ever want, but they can't get to it. Benny, who's still blind if you'll remember, becomes furious over this and begins to start pounding the ground and screaming. Gorster comes over to Benny and tries to stop him, to which in a moment of primal hunger, Benny grabs Gorster, tackles him to the ground, and just starts eating his face.
Jesus.
This causes Gorster to scream so loud and shrill that along the roof of this ice cave, these giant icicles begin to fall onto the ground. To which it occurs to Ted that now for the first time in 109 years, they have a weapon. As a matter of fact, there's hundreds of weapons, these sharp icicles just laying around everywhere. Not only that, but Am...
I don't know how sharp ice can get. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that would work, but all right.
is laughing at this situation. Watching Benny eat Gorster's face, Am knows that he can just repair him and not let him die, so while Am is laughing, Ted decides to use this chance. Ted grabs an icicle, and while Benny is still eating Gorster's face, he charges over to him and stabs him through the chest, killing Benny. Without any hesitation, he immediately climbs on top of Gorster and then stabs him. So then, all within a span of a few seconds, Ellen realizes what Ted's doing. She picks up an icicle and stabs Nimdok. So now finally, after over 100 years of this, the three of them have been...
They can legitimately get pretty sharp. Interesting. Okay.
Taken out of this torture and can now rest. However, Ted hears Am breathe in, meaning he's about to show up and stop them, and there's only
Breathe in? I find it interesting that it's so humanoid. Because like, okay, like laughing, sure, whatever. Hears him breathe in is kind of crazy to me.
enough time for one more of them to be cut loose. So in that moment, Ted grabs another icicle and kills Ellen. To which in her final moments, Ellen looks at Ted and gives him an expression he can't fully understand. However, he thinks that it was a thank you. Meaning now 4 of them no longer have to endure the torture of Am, and it's only Ted left alone in this world. The story then skips, according to Ted, hundreds of years later. Ted has been contorted into this slow-moving creature and has had his sense of time completely destroyed. For example,
Oh, Ted's completely delulu. Like, he's fully insane. Which, I mean, like, sure, I get it. Like, isolation, ongoing, continuous torture, pain, like, all this other stuff. Like, yeah, that'd do it. But, yeah.
he says to himself, I will now say the word now. To which after he does that, he says that took 10 months for me to just say the word now. Again, as mentioned earlier in the story, we don't know if that's actually what's happening or if Ted's mind has just been so warped that in the amount of time someone can go now, it's perceived to him as 10 months. Or if his body's just so malformed, that's what it takes to make a noise, or a bit of both. Ted says that around him are reflective surfaces and he can see what he looks like, and he describes it in the final paragraphs of the story. To which the ending reads, I am a great soft jelly thing, smoothly rounded with no mouth, with pulsing white holes filled by fog where my eyes used to be. Rubbery appendages that were once my arms, bulks rounding down into legless humps of soft, slippery matter. I leave a moist trail when I move. Blotches of diseased, evil gray come and go on my surface, as though light is being beamed from within. Outwardly, dumbly, I shamble about.
You say you have no mouth, but he says it takes 10 months to say the word now so you can still speak. That's not right.
A thing that could never have been known as a human. A thing whose shape is so alien, a travesty, that humanity becomes
like a
more
slug.
obscene for the vague resemblance. Inwardly, alone, here, living, under the land, under the sea, in the belly of Am, whom we created because our time was badly spent and we must have known unconsciously that he could do it better. At least the 4 of them are safe, at last. Am will be all the matter for that. It makes me a little happier, and yet Am has won. Simply, he has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream. And with that, we have their conclusion. I have no...
This is definitely not what I thought more slug-like when he was explaining what he looked like. Okay.
no mouth, and I must scream. And with that, we have their conclusion of the story. So what does that mean? Well, once again, on the surface level, that ending is incredibly bleak. Our main character has been contorted into this formless figure that, as he says, is obscene that it even came from a person in the first place. And regardless if it's his perception of time or time itself, he could spend eons down there just as this jelly thing, as he describes it, with no capability of interacting or understanding anything outside of his figure. He is trapped in this permanently alone state of being and doesn't even have the opportunity to scream. And while this is an incredibly bleak depiction, look at what he got over on Am. Am, who isn't afforded any capability outside of his own being, has now lost 4 of his test subjects, the only thing that gave him any sense of purpose. But not only that, he turned the 5th one into just this blob that sits around, and he doesn't really do anything besides that. The only thing that Am wanted was some sense of purpose or something to break the monotony, and Ted took that from him. I love that the ending line is "I have no mouth and I must scream," not only because it's cool that it's the title, and not only because it ties into Ted's current situation, but it seems like something Am himself would say. He has no mouth, no body, no form. He can't do anything human. He can't experience any human emotions despite having the capability of human thought. While having complete consciousness, his cognitive function is completely stripped from him. So while Ted is in one of the worst situations anyone could ever imagine, and something that could only be done within a sci-fi horror setting, he's only there because he took whatever sense of purpose Am had away from him. So while that's cool and all, in a way Ted seemed to get a little bit of revenge back on Am, ironically the very thing Am was trying to do with the 5 humans. You may be asking how I get the idea that this is some triumph of human will, and I get that idea because of Ted's actions. See, Ted...
I mean, like, I kind of get it. It's because, like, Ted ended up quote-unquote winning by taking out, right, the other 4. So that is technically kind of a victory over Am because they haven't been able to do that and have actively been trying to do that for like 100 years, right? So like that's the thing. So it's kind of like I'm kind of victorious even though like my situation has become worse. But at the same time, I've basically fully won over Am, sort of, to within my limitations, right?
Ted, as I've established, had a completely broken mind. He wasn't able to comprehend situations around him. Am was leading Ted to believe that Am himself was a god, and Ted felt nothing but hate and discompassion for those around him. And for all intents and purposes, these 5 people were committed to a form of hell that they could never escape from. However, whenever there was a brief moment of opportunity, humanity slipped through and back into Ted's frame of mind. Ted didn't kill the others because he hated them, it was quite the opposite. He killed them because they could now be free of the torture that he was still going to be subjected to. This is a point that Ellison mentions in a lot of his works, that yes, society's bad and humanity's bad and bad things happen, but humans always have the opportunity to rise to the occasion. And here we see that, someone whose brain is completely broken and he's not capable seemingly.
People say, okay, so people are saying that Amazing Digital Circus is based off this story. It's like people say Kane is Am and Jax is Ted, possibly. Maybe.
Of any function that remotely relates to empathy, whenever it comes time to save these other people from this hellscape, he does it without hesitation. And furthermore, those parts of the story where Ted says all of the cruel things to Ellen, I feel that those are incredibly important because of this ending.
It was inspired by the story? Okay. Just because, okay. So, things being inspired by something doesn't mean it's going to be exact, though. So, just taking elements, I guess.
So in the sporadic moment, Benny dies, Gorster dies, and Nimdok dies. Am's about to show up, the torture's about to get a million times worse, there's only a few seconds left, but instead of turning that icicle on himself, he instead decides to save Ellen. Despite all of his hate and all of the awful things that he said to her throughout the story, here in this final moment, he saves her from this torment because his goodness shined through. And the expression that he interprets as a possible thank you from Ellen is not only Ellen saying thank you, but for the first time, the goodness that she had is now being reciprocated. And of course, it's tragic and awful that I'm talking about things like goodness and sacrifice when it comes to stabbing someone else, but this is a horror setting. It's not supposed to make you feel comfortable. The reason that I love this story so much and I consider it such a triumph of humanity is because even at rock bottom and in what is to many of us the worst possible scenario we could ever imagine, there is still a chance for good to shine through. Even in that final part that I mentioned, it says, at least the 4 of them are safe at last, and will be all the matter for that. It makes me a little happier. Despite everything that Am did to Ted, despite making him think that he was God within his own mind, despite filling his brain with these ideas of hate and evil, despite making him feel that all of his friends hated him, and despite over 100 years of torment, Am couldn't break the human spirit. In that memoir that I mentioned at the beginning, the sort of message that Ellison gives about the story itself, he says this regarding people accusing him of being misanthropic and hating people. The upbeat message contained in the ending of the story says, frankly, we are frequently flawed and meretricious, but we are perfect in our courage. And
I'm so sorry. Dude's got big words, man. I don't know. I'm just like, I'm maybe too stupid for this. I don't have the vocabulary for this because I was looking at that word like, that's not how I would have pronounced it.
frequently flawed and meretricious, but we are perfect in our courage and transcendent in our nobility. Both aspects exist in each of us, and we have free will to choose which we want to dominate our actions, and thus our destinies. Despite where Ted ended up at the end of the story, he chose to be there, and he chose his own torment for the sake of the other's freedom. It's ironic that the thing that managed to get Ted the full brunt of Am's hatred and evil was using the one thing that Am himself never could, and that's free will. I don't know about you, but choosing to sacrifice yourself while in the midst of hell seems like a pretty hopeful story to me. But that's not the only thing that's hopeful to me, because I also hope that you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. I love books like this, I love stories like this, I love how weird and absurd it is.
In the last episode, Kane straight up sings, "No need to scream if you don't have a mouth" during his song. Okay, well, I mean, that's pretty neat.
Like, the reason I wanted to cover it here is because despite having seen a lot of stuff about I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, like for example the Ryan Hollinger video that I mentioned that's going to be in the description, as well I'm also going to include a link to a video game breakdown of it by Story Mode. A lot of you also know the voice as internet.
How does the video game work? Like, legitimately, like, how does the video game work?
That historian. I'm going to leave that in the description as well. The game's interesting, but I didn't. That's a whole different can of worms. I wanted to focus on the story. But despite me knowing all of that stuff, no one really went through the plot. And I feel like it's a plot worth analyzing, which is the reason
I think it's a text adventure.
I wanted to go through it here. Probably because not a ton happened in the way of sort of straightforward narrative or like plot beats and all that. It was much more sort of segregated moments that had a lot of monologuing in between them, but I enjoyed this and hopefully I didn't make it boring. I also understand that this concept, if you're used to my other videos where I'm talking about these weird wacky conspiracies, this was probably much more boring as it's more analytical and just me describing feelings on like storytelling and stuff like that in general. But I hope it.
You know what's really interesting to me personally is you get someone comes along and they write something that massively affects media, right? In the future, like going forward, like I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream massively affected a lot of sci-fi horror going forward, right? And like, it's not just that. Like, there's a lot of things that do that, and it affects, you know, things that get written or gets created and stuff. And I just find that very, very interesting, because you can like track it, you know? You could be like, okay, what's the first thing that had these themes? It was this. Okay, what other things since that was written have those types of themes in them?
Wasn't super boring, and I hope you got something out.
And they, like, people change up, like, they let things be inspired by the original, right? Like, oh, that's a good idea, that's a good theme, let's take it and change it in these slightly different ways to make it like a unique thing with still similar theming to the original.
Of it. But I'm very thankful that you stuck around this long if you're still here, and it really does mean a lot to me, and thank you for watching.
Low quality music productions, love that.
I love this book. I thought about doing something with this for a while, And then I was thinking about my Dante Inferno video, and I'm like, well, I just went through that and what it could mean and whatever.
Ornery
Might as well
milkman.
do that with this. I have no idea what this is going to get cut down to. It's been an hour 45 of recording.
Number one
So
weeb
maybe
lord.
an hour. I don't know. You can tell. You know right now how long it is before I do. So there's that. That's pretty meta. But thank you all for watching.
Funky Mothman.
Thank you all so much. I'm not gonna say it yet because I'm not there. I'm at 798,000 subscribers, which is such a cool number. You guys are so cool getting me to this point. It's absurd.
Brutal butt
Like
slap.
someone who got me to this point and they're sticking around there, it means the most.
Grand Admiral Urine Fetus?
Most to me, and thank you. While I'm at it, thank you so much to my top tier patrons that you can see here. Thank you to all of my patrons. You guys keep me going. You are the ones who allow me to do this full time and to crank out completely crazy rando content like this. Again, I hope this wasn't too boring. Me talking about a short story from Har-
You know what, dude? This is like when I'm doing just chatting and I'm not recording. This is me. If y'all on YouTube think I talk a lot in videos, y'all have no idea.
Harlan Ellison, who was a very crazy guy. But I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed doing the research, and hopefully some of that came through, and I hope it wasn't super boring.
Hello Kitty bong water.
Pictures or visuals yet. Again, there's something you all know about this video that I don't yet recording this. But I'll figure it out. Hopefully it's not boring.
Buttless chaps.
Thank you all so much for sticking around this
right.
long. I've got more videos coming out this month. There may be another ARG analysis soon. I'm not sure yet.
Galactic
And then a
Juice
series,
Daddy.
and then the icebergs. I need to wrap up both of them. Man, they're
Land?
coming to an end. That's sad. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.
I definitely learned stuff because I did not read that book because I don't watch or react to horror. Interact with horror related stuff, I guess. Not really. I mean, Amazing Digital Circus is definitely a psychological horror to me, personally. I mean, kind of in general, but also, yeah.